Blog Talk Radio.
And today on Working the Web to Win, we're going to talk about a technological threat that literally reaches into every household in this nation. Big business uses it to make billions of dollars per year. Consumers and even a number of foreign governments consider it an out-and-out invasion of privacy. And cyber criminals look at it as a way to get their hand in the cookie jar. Am I talking about eye-in-the-sky surveillance? No, we covered that a couple of weeks ago. Am I railing against Big Brother? Not today. What I'm talking about is the most pervasive and out-of-control use of our personal data that has ever been perpetuated against the American public. This menace is being used against every man, woman, and child big enough to reach the keyboard, and this clear and present danger has a name. The name is called Big Data. All right, and Hector and I are going to talk about the menaces of big data today, and in fact during the next 30 minutes we're also going to show you who's getting rich from the information that you give away freely. We're going to tell you how these people can trick you into divulging your most intimate personal information, and we're going to show you 5 things that you can do to defend yourself against these digital freeloaders. But before I do that, I want Hector to give you the call-in number so you can join in the conversation today.
So for our friends out there in cyber world, I want to give you the phone number. It's 213-943-3808. That's 213-943-3808. Of course, you can also find us on workingtheweb2win.com, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, and now YouTube. You're saying about they can, even if a child can reach a keyboard. Well, there was a story that I read very recently where Target got in trouble because they sent a catalog to somebody's house because by monitoring the purchasing of the household's daughter, they found out that she was pregnant. So they sent a baby catalog to the house saying, "Congratulations on your newborn that's coming," and the dad gets this thing and says, "What the heck is this?" and start asking about. So you don't even have to reach the keyboard; they could be in the womb, and they're still getting caught on this kind of
Now
stuff.
you're scaring me.
Yeah.
Okay. That was one even I hadn't thought of before. But yeah, obviously, if you haven't told Dad that you're pregnant, how am I telling my dad?
Yeah. Well, if I told my dad I was pregnant, he'd probably be happy. All the money I could make out of it.
Anyway, before we get into the show, we'd also like to thank our sponsors.
Yep.
I'll let you lead it off.
Oh, we want to thank Tub King and Senior Tub. Of course, they got the coolest bathtubs around, the clawfoot tubs that are used in all the movies, and of course the senior walk-in tubs, which is the best way to have like a personal spa in your bathroom.
Okay, and also we want to thank MedMasters,
Yep.
which is the premier social network for the medical community. If you're looking to make a connection or stay connected,
Or get a job.
MedMasters is the way to go. It's the free medical database and social networking for the medical industry.
Yeah, and they keep all your stuff private too.
That's right. That's right. And then we're going to talk about that because, like you said, it's not a matter of just collecting the breadcrumbs that we leave as we go, through life surfing the web. It's what do people do with it and how can it come back to bite us?
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it, if you're looking at the big data thing in general, which is not something new. It really started about 30 years ago when we all started having databases of all kinds where we can collect all kinds of information. But if you look at big data today, it really falls into really 5 categories. And this sort of follows with the surveillance thing and the things, the whole subject line that we've been talking about, the brave new world that we live in. You have big data for government, which is the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, the IRS. They're gathering information, all kinds of people. Then you have what I call the internet big data, which is Google, Yahoo, Bing, and then all the social nets. They gather information up the yin-yang, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, those guys.
Big business.
Yeah, big business is next. Again, big retailers, the big internet giants, Amazon, eBay, Craigslist, those kinds of guys. The next would be like foreign governments, which are actually actively gathering data on American citizens. And then the last and most scariest one's probably the cyber criminals, because what they're going to do is they're going to go after all these big datas, regardless of whose data it is. They might crack into China's place just to get the stuff that they've been gathering, Yeah,
but for most people, the big danger is, cyber criminals, if they can get a hold of your financial information like they did at Target and other
Nordstrom's
retailers,
or wherever,
right?
Yeah.
Then you're in a world of hurt because then somebody can use your identity, they can open up other credit card accounts, and there's a million ways in which they can use big data to come back and bite you. So the trick is, first of all, what where is big data coming from? Where's the data mining originating? What part of your daily life or your routine do you need to change to make it more difficult for people to follow those little digital breadcrumbs that you leave as you surf the web? And what kind of habits do you need to change if you want to protect your privacy, protect your data, and keep people from getting all these free goodies that they can make money with at your expense?
Yeah, and again, not all of it is electronic. So, for example, there was one of the articles I read where stores were gathering your zip codes when you were checking out at the register. And what they were telling you was, well, they had to get that information to make the credit card purchase valid, which is not true. And now they're being sued over that because, you're not supposed to do that kind of stuff. And what they were doing was tying the transaction to your location where you live and that kind of stuff so they can follow through on it.
Yeah, well, you know what they'll do after this, right? They'll just tie the credit card back to the database, because if you've got, especially if you're using a credit card from a store, they've already got that information. All they have to do is cross-reference it.
Right.
So there's always, every time they come up with a law or they come up with some way to stop somebody from gathering information that you don't want them to have, they'll find a way around it. We're going to talk about some of those ways.
Well, I know that, when you go in the store, for example, a lot of people, I see people literally carrying tablets so they could check prices in the store and all that kind of stuff. And when they're doing that, they're generally on a Wi-Fi network. And guess what? Nordstrom got in trouble for tracking IP addresses when you log into their network. So now they can track and look and see what you're looking at and so on.
Yeah, remember it was 4 or 5 months ago I reported about in London where they actually had trash cans.
The Wi-Fi trash cans, right.
Wi-Fi enabled. So again, when you're walking through the mall, they could follow your digital footprints as you went from store to store, window to window.
And there are several malls in South Korea that this is a normal thing, because, they're really big on doing this kind of stuff. But again, it's not just that they're gathering all this data, they need to be able to protect that data.
That's correct.
And that's the biggest problem right here, that they aren't able to actually protect the data.
No, and we've seen that recently, and it's getting worse, not better. But what the problem is that most of the businesses, all they care about is using the information to make more money. In fact, I've got an article right here which says Intel introduces new 15-core server chips to handle big data from the Internet of Things.
Right.
So it's not just your personal usage that's being tracked.
Huda or whatever it's called.
It's all, because we just had our episode about all the smart appliances, and they're already web-enabled.
And again, a processor with 16 cores or whatever, then you get like 8 of those in one machine. That's like a data center in a single box. So they're gearing up to do a lot of this data crunching, and there are companies out there that specialize in this, so you can just gather the data yourself, upload it to them, and they'll give you the answers that you're looking for and so on. The way I look at it, there's a lot of different kinds of dangers that people really need to think about. I was reading this article, which was really funny. It's sort of I think it was in a Russian magazine, believe it or not, when you think, security and all that. But the article was talking about how these different organizations are using it for social behavior manipulation, if you will. Social engineering. So they can sway our opinions and so on. But, that's just the beginning of the data. Swaying our opinions that it's this time of year to wear pink or something, that's one deal. But then if they take that data and start using it against you, like denying you for having a driver's license because you just turned 68 or something like that, and they don't know how well you can see or anything like that, because right now the way it is, you just have to pass a test.
Right.
But they can start using data to deny, right now, your insurance rate goes up based on your credit score history and so on. Your health insurance and life insurance can go up based on your credit scores and all those kinds of things too. So the invasion of privacy leads to all kinds of abuse of this information, and that's, I think, the biggest danger, other than people stealing all your goods.
Right, but the thing is that all of these entities are making the big data's job so much easier. Because I have an article right here, is actually from a site called the Smart Data Collective, and it says Facebook's big data, equal parts exciting and terrifying.
Right.
Because it's not so much a matter of what they're gathering, but what they can do with this data, and the fact that they're getting more and more and more of your personal information. And Facebook, Google, all these guys, they're not afraid of using it. They've been using it for their own internal advertising purposes for some time now.
Yeah, I predict that in the not too distant future, several of these major mega corporations are going to get mega egg on their face. And what that's going to mean is that the consumers who have been using them are going to have a big falling out and the negative impact on their bottom line is going to be horrendous. So we know that Google is one of the biggest players on the internet. They got 82% of search and so on. But if they have a major data breach that it hurts 100 million people or something like that.
Facebook with
or
a billion,
Facebook,
right?
A billion two people. What's going to happen to them? Well, people are going to say, "Screw you! I'm going to use this other thing." You know, just like Chrome. Chrome was able to leapfrog over the Internet Explorer after 14 years of being in place as the #1 browser. Now, because of all the privacy issues, you might see Komodo or some other product jump over them.
Well, and it's not even just the matter of how they're using it to gather the information. It's adware. You know, I call it annoyware because every time I go out like I'm using Chrome and I'll go out and research something on the web, like for our show, for days or even weeks afterwards, I'm barraged with ads for whatever I happen to be searching the web for.
Yeah.
You know, and where there are other search engines like DuckDuckGo that don't track that information, don't provide adware. Like I said, I call it annoyware.
Yeah.
Because it's adware if they show it to me once in a while, but if it's in my face on every site I go to for the next 2 weeks, that gets annoying. And until they realize that, or until people start jumping ship from one platform to another because of the fact that they're just tired of being annoyed, I mean that holds a lot of sway.
Well, I can tell you one thing that's sort of funny. I mean, they'll annoy you for months, but what they don't really always know is when you make the purchase. So, for example, a year ago, I was getting ready to buy a backpacking tent because I was going to go on an 18-mile hike, and I bought the tent. But for 4 months after that, they were still trying to sell me a tent. You know,
and you feel like saying, "I have bought the tent."
Right,
Can you read that?
And even when you go in and clear your cookies and all those kinds of things, at the end of the day, those still are tracking you.
Oh yeah, we want to talk about that too, because that's where again a lot of people miss the boat because they're not even aware that these cookies exist. They're not aware how they work or how they can shake what I call the bugs out of the rug. Because most of your browsers actually have a facility where you can go in and you can purge your browsing history. You can purge the cookies from your browser. But what's a cookie? I mean, it's not. It sounds like something sweet and delicious, isn't it? But it's exactly the opposite.
Right. It's something that's tracking every move you make.
And you can get it from a bunch of different sources. Anytime that you go and get freeware, free apps. If you go register for a game, a lot of gaming sites require you to just take their cookie for you to even be able to play on these, multiplayer games. Well, they're not just there to allow you to play the game. Who knows what else they're doing behind the scenes?
It's also consoles, smartphones,
everything,
smart TVs. I mean, they all can take these cookies.
Right.
And once the cookie's in there, they're tracking you, whether you're watching your TV and Netflix or something else. As a matter of fact, I mean, I watch Netflix a lot. I get emails from Netflix all the time saying, "Hey, Season 2 is coming out." Well, I know that I want to watch Season 2 because I watched the entire Season 1 of that program.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
that's
tracking.
how cookies work. They're in the background. You don't even
tracking
know they're there.
everything.
So again, it's a matter of people having to be a little more proactive when it comes to their browsing habits, the platforms that they're using, unless you just don't care.
I mean, we'll talk about it at the end of the show, but on the blog itself, we have a list of items. And again, there's many other articles that we've done that talk about ways that you can protect yourself from cyber criminals and all those kinds of things. But there's a list of 5 or 6 things that easy, simple things you can do that you can plug into your browser to give you more privacy, and we'll talk about them later on. One of the things I like to talk about is, when we're talking about the dangers of big data, there's lots of different kinds of dangers. So, for example, you know that you can lose all your financial data. You can also lose all your money. You can lose your privilege to do lots of different things. Like, for example, in this country, the government has been trying to figure out a way to get a database on everybody who has weapons or guns or whatever you want to call them. Now they're going to be able to figure out whether you bought it or not by going in and getting the big data.
Oh, sure.
They won't have to have the registration database.
And I point out in my blog that all the big, your big players like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, now, of course, they say the government is forcing us to give them that data, but they're not giving it to them because they're getting paid millions of dollars.
Right. It's not free. They don't give it away.
But they can hold their hands and say, wait, they're holding onto our head and make us do it.
As a matter of fact, last year when Twitter took a loss, one of the biggest profit centers was these pipelines that they sell.
Right.
And again, Google sells to Twitter, Twitter sells to these guys. They sell these data streams to each other so that they can do search and all that kind of stuff. And it's not just Google, it's Yahoo and Bing and all. They're all buying these data streams, and they all also sell them to the NSA, the FBI, the CIA.
And who knows who else? I mean, they're not telling. I mean, that's the bottom line. It was like a few years ago, back in 2008, Google got into trouble because at that time they were actually selling the database or portions of it to private companies. And one company was actually a German magazine called Stern, and they bought a bunch of these names, including name, address, age, a lot of the demographic information, and then they started calling the people that were on the list. These were German nationals, and of course these people were not only amazed that they were on these lists, but they were actually quite upset, and it resulted in the
big
German
lawsuit.
government. Yeah, and the same thing happened with Facebook, right, over the use of their facial recognition technology. Because the thing is, in other parts of the world, there are laws against how you gather and what kind of information you gather and how you can, disseminate it.
Yeah.
Not over here. There's no speed bumps on the information superhighway in the U.S.
Well, I know that if our listeners go onto the blog and you go into the notes page, there's several comprehensive articles that you can go in there that talk about a lot of the ethics issues and all the different things. They talk about the lawsuits, they talk about different tools you can use and so on. And I highly recommend that if you're really concerned about these kinds of things, which I think every American should be, they should go in there and educate themselves by not just listening to the show, because this is only a half an hour show.
Right.
They need to really go in there and read all these different articles.
Sure.
And again, this is not a new subject for us. We've probably done a dozen shows on cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff.
We have to cover this stuff, because like I said, the thing is that most people don't realize how vulnerable they are.
Yeah.
They don't have a clue.
Well, it's actually getting much worse. Every year that we've been talking about this,
Of course, the technologies, the servers are getting cheaper. They're getting now they're using artificial intelligence to go out there and do a lot of the work to sift through all the data. I mean, 'cause that's why everybody's upset with the NSA, but they're not the only player in the game.
well, not that the sensors are way up the scale. I mean, 3 years ago there was no such thing as a kiosk in a store that could track you. I mean, that didn't exist. So the technology has taken a big leap forward, and the censoring of everything on the planet there's sensors everywhere.
Right.
So when you walk down through the aisle at Walmart, the kiosk jumps up and says, "Hey, buy these cookies."
Right.
I mean,
how do they know that?
Hello, Mr. Yakamoto. Welcome back to the Gap. How those assorted tank tops work out for you?
Mr. Yakamoto.
That's kind of scary.
this stuff is happening, and people just don't really understand. They don't really pay very close attention to it.
No.
But it's something that's really eroding away at our privacy in a
and
big
like
way.
I said, when you're online, first thing you have to realize is you don't own your own data. You really don't.
Right.
When you sign up for a social network, read the contract. It'll tell you, you have the right to use their platform, but basically they control how that information is used.
They sort of say, for example, Facebook tries to tell you, well, you own it, but you really don't own it. That's sort of how they tell you. And it's not just Facebook, it's Twitter, Google. You can download what you put in there, but you can never really completely take it out.
Right.
That's literally what they're saying. Even if you delete it, it's still in there.
Well, and the thing too is that the rules always change, but they don't always tell you what the rules are. Because like right now in my blog, I actually went on to Google and I actually went through their user agreement, and currently, this is the current iteration that came up as of December, it says, information we share is the following. Some of it's with your consent, which it says, we will share personal information with companies, organizations, or individuals outside of Google when we have your consent to do so. That's their new policy.
Right.
Okay. However, it says with domain administrators,
you can give them whatever they want.
If your Google account is managed for you by a domain administrator, then your domain administrator and resellers who provide user support to your organization will have access to your Google account information.
This is what it doesn't say.
What does that mean in English?
When you sign in to Google the first time or whatever, it says, you allow us to share your stuff. And you say yes, because you think you're saying yes to get a free Gmail account or whatever. Well, you're also saying they can give away your stuff. So at that point in time, if you don't opt out, which in many cases you'd think you're not going to get the free Gmail account or whatever.
Or you don't even know how to opt out.
Right.
Because they don't make that easy to find either.
Right. So there's a way you can actually go into your Google profile and shut off a bunch of this stuff.
Yeah, well, in fact, I talked all about that and take you through the steps in the process, because if you want to go in there and eliminate your browsing history and shake out the cookies and all that, all you have to do is you click on the little button at the top of the page, and then you click on where it says history, and then you say, eliminate, and then you can do it all through
and all browsers
through the end of time.
And all browsers have these.
But you have to look for it,
right?
And that's where most people don't even realize that exists.
Right. And I mean, we also use Advanced System Care, which actually goes out and clears browser history and those kinds of things on a regular basis. And I am keeping a lookout for somebody calling it. But all that stuff is in the article. And again, look at the article, read the article, take advantage of these simple things that you can do to protect yourself.
More importantly, you've got to start thinking about changing some of your habits.
Right.
Okay, because again, if you're going to make it, it's like if you're going to leave your wallet sitting out on the front doorstep wide open, somebody's going to come along and they're going to take it from you. So it's the same thing when you're talking about protecting your information.
Right.
Don't make it easy for them, because there are browsers, there are search engines that do not collect the personal information, and that's where the rubber meets the road, because if these places are scooping up all your information, what do you think they're doing that for?
Right. Because they're going to sell it.
They're going to sell it.
They're not going to keep bags and bags of data.
Or they're going to use it for their own purposes to sell their products or the products of their clients.
Well, I mean,
either way, they're going to use it to make money.
Right.
And you're giving them a service for free.
Right.
Okay. And even goes beyond that, because if you are like somebody that's, for instance, let's say you go to the drugstore and you've got one of their little user cards or whatever, that information is being tracked and that information is being sold as well.
And when they come out with the new ones that actually have chips in it that actually send out signals, which will be the next step that they're working on, the SID type cards, it'll be triple tracking you. And so, I mean, I always tell people, when I was a computer consultant, one of the simplest things you could do was just have a good password. And don't write it and put it on a piece of paper right on top of your computer. People used to have to tape the password taped to the computer so anybody could walk up to it and get it.
Right.
It should be at least 8 digits long. You should change it regularly. That's a very simple thing, but that's a behavioral thing that you have to do. You have to go in and clear these cookies out regularly. If you don't do that, they're still there. They're tracking you. You have to run your antivirus, your anti-malware software all the time. You have to scan your computer on a regular basis. These are simple type things that people can do, but a lot of people just don't do them.
Yeah, well, up until recently, most people, even most industries, they really didn't pay attention to those details as to how big data was being collected and used. In fact, one of the things that I pointed out in my blog is there are several companies that are billion-dollar companies that literally are the biggest companies you've never heard of, that make their money predominantly by collecting and reselling big data. They're data mining companies. One is called Axiom.
And Epsilon.
Right. And those are two of the biggest players on the planet, billion-dollar companies that probably most people have never heard of.
If I'm not mistaken, Axiom started out as an email company. And now they've grown into this big monster, data center that can, crunch out whatever they need to crunch out. When I was going through the things, I found a lot of interesting articles, and I wanted to mention some of them because I want our listeners to go to and look at them. One of them is by the New York Times, a very comprehensive article. It's called The Age of Big Data, and it tells you about Nordstrom and all the different kinds of places and the lawsuits and those kinds of things. NPR had a pretty good one, which I was surprised with because usually NPR is not that comprehensive. But they have one called The Brave New World, Big Data, Big Danger, and they're actually sounding the alarm. MIT Review, they talk about the dictatorship of data, which is about people abusing data. And then there were several other ones. And then there was the Russian one that I was telling you about. That's like a 10-page article. But it's got a lot of good stuff in it about how like Facebook is using this to do social manipulation and so on. So
farmers are worried about these sharing of big data now.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the information is just like, you think of the farmers, years ago it was just mom and pop and a couple of cows, but today it's big business.
Yeah.
And the information is very tightly held because of everything from the amount of water that they're able to receive. Right now, California's in big trouble because of the big drought.
Right.
The types of seeds that you're using, the types of
the lakes are
pesticides
going
that they're
away.
using, all these things are very important. And again, if that information gets out, information is power, and ultimately information costs money.
Right.
There are speculators out there with crops, buying and selling all kinds of commodities based on that information. So like I said, everybody is really starting to get the picture, at least business-wise, that big data is very important and you have to control that information. It's just at the consumer level, people are just sitting out there in la-la land.
Well, I know several shows ago we talked about different things that you go. We talked about using other browsers other than Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer. Specifically, we talked about using Komodo, which doesn't track your stuff, but there's also search engines that don't do it. One's called DuckDuckGo or something like that. But plugins, if you're insisting on using Chrome and Firefox and so on, there are lots of plugins that you can get. So there's one called Google Privacy that actually plugs into Chrome, that actually shuts down some of what Google does. It also sends nasty grams to Google saying don't track me and all those kinds of things. There's a thing called Ad Blocker. There's one called Ad Block, Ad Remover, and one of my all-time favorites, Trust, that I think people can use. Again, also, if you have a good big name antivirus, many of those have plugins for your browsers.
Yeah, and there's
that do
second
similar
tier
types
like
of
Advanced
things.
System Care, which
Right.
we use, which is, again, that links on the
Or malware bytes
website.
and so on. Again, these things you need to go through and use on your system on a regular basis. If you don't know where to get these, again, almost every browser has its own store, if you will,
Right.
where you can get and find these plugins, and that's where I would recommend that they go looking for them. But you have to actively look for them. You know, you have to actively look for ad blockers and all those kinds of
true.
things. You have to do something other than sit there and
and uninstall themselves.
right, just play with your computer. And they're available for your smartphones and your tablets and iPhones and all those other things. So that's what I know. We need to get to the Worldwide Weird before the show is over. And I know that you had a couple of really good ones that you showed me earlier.
Yeah, we're gonna go to the lighter side. In fact, what's interesting about the World Wide Web is it's worldwide.
Yeah.
And so every now and then we pick up some really funny little things that are going on around the world. Like one of the weird and wacky pursuits in Korea is apparently a little festival called the Mud Festival.
They all look like they're bathing in mud or something. I mean, I'm really not sure. And they all look like Americans, too.
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
really sure it
crazy.
was Korea or whatever.
Well, that's what it says, though. It says it's just outside of Seoul, Korea, where they have this festival every
Maybe
year.
they call it the American Festival, and all the Americans go there, and then they throw mud on
I
it.
was thinking, it looks like to me like a view from Bike Week or something, you know, after they go down to the beach and have had a few.
Yeah.
But one of the other ones I like was in England. One of the things that they apparently like to do in southern England is to snorkel in some of these peat bogs.
Like you can see anything in a peat bog.
Well, what they do is they cut a trench between it, and I guess it fills up like a canal, but still, it's got to be pretty nasty. Maybe those are the people that eventually migrate to the Mud Festival.
Right,
I'm not
maybe.
sure. And then there was the one that I thought that was your favorite, which was the one where they were doing mountain bike chariot racing.
Yeah, this is what I did like. It looks like it'd be fun unless you crashed. You
Well,
know?
like I said, I don't know if I'd want to be in the chariot going down the hill, you know, because...
And the chariots look sort of weird. It's like a trash can with two wheels on the side.
Like I said, that's the guy that's really going to have to... You notice he's wearing a helmet, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, well, at least if he falls down on his head, maybe he won't break his head. I know we got a couple of minutes left. We still want to thank our sponsors today. So we want to thank Tub King and Senior Bath, of course. That's where you can get the most beautiful clawfoot tubs that the movie stars use in all the movies.
And the high-tech walk-in tubs, too.
The walk-in tubs with the hydro and the water and the hot water. I feel like getting one right now. I mean, I don't know about it.
Well, like I said, in fact, last time we posted a little blog about them. I said, I wouldn't think of it as a tub. Think of it as an in-house spa.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when you really think of it, but the jets and all that kind of stuff, and it takes a lot less water, and it's a pretty cool setup.
Yeah, well, we keep trying to talk them to bring one in here so we could do like the California where they do the radio show from the hot tub. You know, we want to do that, but they haven't wheeled it in yet.
Yeah. Hey, here we go. We have to make it happen.
You can do it virtually, though. We want to really do it.
Really do it.
And also, we want to thank MedMasters, the
course.
premier medical social network.
And that's where, if you're in the medical industry and you want to make connections with other medical professionals, or you're looking to move up in your industry,
That's
or
right.
you're just looking for a job in the medical industry, they have tons of great stuff on their site. And of course, you can connect with people, and they have educational videos and all that.
Right.
I mean, it's really a great site, and they don't sell their data to anybody.
Yeah, we're
That's
down to
the
about
big
the last 60 seconds, so we might as well tell them what we're going to be doing next week because it's going to be an episode that's near and dear to your heart. It's called Social Media Madness Roundup. Why don't you tell them a little about
And we're
that?
going to be talking about all the exciting things that have been happening in social media, other than the big data. But we'll be talking about Twitter, Facebook. We'll talk about the top 5, because all the big things, they've all had a lot of changes in the last 6 months, and we haven't done a roundup.
I think you were even going to talk a little about Pinterest, which we haven't talked about.
Right, we'll talk a little bit about Pinterest. We'll talk a little bit about Instagram. Also, we'll roll them in there too. Until next time.
Keep working the web.